the Jersey Shore once again. My favorite place in the world. Picking up with the age of AI and our human future. I just love books. And I've discovered the library brand new again. Let's see where we left off. Governments and regions. Many nations are and are likely to remain indefinitely reliant on network platforms that are both designed and hosted in other countries. Thus, they are also likely to remain, at least in part, dependent on other countries' regulators for continued access, key inputs, and international updates. Therefore, many governments will have an incentive to guarantee the continued operation of AI-driven online services from other countries that have already been incorporated into fundamental aspects of their society. It is really breezy out here, so I hope you can hear me okay. This undertaking may take the form of regulating network platforms owners or operators, instituting requirements for their operation, or managing the training of their AI. Governments might insist that developers include steps to avoid certain forms of bias or address particular ethical quandaries. Public figures may succeed in leveraging a network platform and its AI to obtain greater visibility for their content, enabling them to reach larger audiences. But if platform operators decide that such prominent figures have violated content standards, they can readily be censored or removed, rendering them unable to reach such broad audiences or driving their audiences underground. Or their content could be accompanied by some form of warning label or other potentially stigmatizing qualification. The issue is what person or institution should make that decision. The authority to independently make and enforce such judgments now resting with some companies reflects a level of power that few democratic governments have wielded. While most people would consider it undesirable for private companies to have this degree of power and control, ceding it to government bodies would be almost equally problematic. We have moved beyond conventional policy approaches. When it comes to network platforms, the necessity for such assessments and decisions has arisen swiftly and almost accidentally in recent years, seeming to have surprised users, governments, and companies alike. It needs to be resolved. Network platforms and geopolitics. The emerging geopolitics of network platforms comprise a key new aspect of international strategy, and governments are not the only players. Governments may increasingly seek to limit the use or behavior of such systems, or attempt to prevent them from edging out homegrown rivals in important regions, lest a competing society or economy gain a powerful influence over that country's industrial, economic, or more difficult to define political and cultural development. Yet, because governments generally do not create or operate these network platforms, the actions of inventors, corporations, and individual users will shape the field along with government restrictions or incentives, creating a strategic arena that is particularly dynamic and difficult to predict. Further, a new form of cultural and political anxiety is being added to this already complex equation. In Beijing, Washington, and some European capitals, concern has been expressed and articulated obliquely elsewhere about the implications of conducting broad aspects of national economic and social life on network platforms facilitated by AI designed in other potentially rival countries. From this technological and policy ferment, new geopolitical configurations are being established. The United States have given rise to a globe-spanning technologically leading set of privately operated network platforms that rely increasingly on AI. The roots of this achievement lie in academic leadership at universities that attract top global talent, a startup ecosystem that enables participants to bring innovations rapidly to scale and profit from their developments, and government support of advanced R&D through the National Science Foundation, DARPA, and other agencies. The prevalence of English as a global language, the creation of homegrown or U.S.-influenced technology standards, and the emergence of a substantial domestic base of individual and corporate customers all provide a favorable environment for U.S. network platform operators. Some of these operators eschew government involvement and see their interests as primarily non-national, while others have embraced government contracts and programs. Abroad, they are all increasingly being treated, often without distinction, as creations and representatives of the United States. Although in many cases the U.S. government's role was confined to staying out of their way, the United States has begun to view network platforms as an aspect of international strategy, restricting the domestic activities of some foreign platforms and restricting the export of some software and technology that could facilitate the growth of foreign competitors. At the same time, federal and state regulators have identified major domestic network platforms as target for antitrust actions. In the near term, at least, this simultaneous drive for strategic preeminence and domestic multiplicity may push U.S. development in conflicting directions. China has similarly supported the development of network platforms that are already national in scale, but at the same time are poised to expand even further. While Beijing's regulatory approach has encouraged fierce competition among domestic technology players with global markets as the ultimate goal, it has largely excluded or mandated heavily tailored offerings by non-Chinese counterparts within China's borders. In recent years, Beijing has also taken steps to shape international technology standards and bar the export of sensitive domestically developed technologies. Chinese network platforms predominate in China and nearby regions, and some are leading in global markets. Some Chinese network platforms enjoy built-in advantages within Chinese diaspora communities, Chinese-speaking communities in the United States and Europe, for example, continue to heavily use WeChat's financial and messaging functions, but their appeal is not limited to Chinese consumers. Having dominated China's rough-and-tumble domestic market, the country's preeminent network platforms and its AI technology are positioned to compete in the global market. In certain markets, such as the United States and India, governments have become increasingly outspoken regarding Chinese network platforms and other Chinese digital technology as potential or de facto extensions of the Chinese government's policy objectives. While this may be true in certain instances, the difficulties of some Chinese network platform operators suggest that company relationships with the Chinese Communist Party may be complex and varied in practice. Chinese network platform operators may not automatically reflect party or state interests. The correlation is likely to depend on particular network platforms' functions and the extent to which their operators understand and navigate unspoken governmental red lines. More broadly, while East and Southeast Asia, the home of companies with global reach, produce key technologies such as semiconductors, servers, and consumer electronics, they are also the home of locally created network platforms. Across the region, Chinese and American hosted platforms are influential to varying degrees among varying segments of the population, and their relationships to network platforms, as in other aspects of economics and geopolitics. The countries of the region have been closely tied to the U.S.-derived technology ecosystem, but there is also substantial use of Chinese network platforms as well as broader engagement with Chinese companies and technology, which East and Southeast Asians may regard as organically connected to their region and integral to their own economic success. Europe, unlike China and the United States, has yet to create homegrown global network platforms or cultivate the sort of domestic digital technology industry that has supported the development of major platforms elsewhere. Still, Europe commands the attention of the major network platform operators with its leading companies and universities, its tradition of Enlightenment exploration, which laid the central foundations for the computer age, its sizable market, and a regulatory apparatus that is formidable in its ability to innovate and impose legal requirements. Yet, Europe continues to face disadvantages for the initial scaling of new network platforms because of its need to serve many languages and national regulatory apparatuses in order to reach its combined market. By contrast, national network platforms in the United States and China are able to start at a continental scale, allowing their companies to better afford the investment needed in order to continue scaling in other languages. The EU has recently focused regulatory attention on the terms of network platform operators' participation in its market, including these operators and other entities' use of AI. As in other geopolitical questions, Europe faces the choice of whether to act as an ally to one side or the other in each major technological sphere, shaping its course by establishing a special relationship or as a balancer between sides. Here are the preferences of the traditional EU states, and the newer Central and Eastern European entrants may differ, reflecting varying geopolitical and economic situations. Thus far, historic global powers, such as France and Germany, have prized independence and the freedom to maneuver in their technology policy. However, peripheral European states with recent and direct experience of foreign threats, such as post-Soviet Baltic and Central European states, have shown greater readiness to identify with the U.S.-led technosphere. India, while still an emerging force in this arena, has substantial intellectual capital, a relatively innovation-friendly business and academic environment, and a vast reserve of technology and engineering talent that could support the creation of leading network platforms, as has recently been demonstrated with its homegrown online shopping industry. India's population and economy are of a size that could sustain potentially independent network platforms without recourse to other markets. Likewise, Indian-designed network platforms have the potential to become popular in other markets as well. In previous decades, much of India's software talent has been deployed in the IT services industry or in non-Indian network platforms. Now, as the country assesses its regional relationships and relative reliance on imported technology, it may elect either to chart a more independent path or assume a principal role within an international bloc of technologically compatible nations. Russia, despite a formidable national tradition in math and science, so far has produced few digital products and services with consumer appeal beyond its own borders. Nevertheless, its formidable cyber capabilities and demonstrated ability to penetrate defenses and carry out operations across global networks suggest that Russia must be counted among the important technological powers of the world. Perhaps as a result of exploiting the online vulnerabilities of other countries, Russia has also fostered the use of certain network platforms on a national scale, such as search example Yandex, though in their present form these have relatively limited appeal to non-Russian consumers. Currently, these platforms function as a fallback or as an alternative to the dominant providers, not as substantial economic competitors. Shaped primarily by these governments and regions, a multidisciplinary contest for economic advantage, digital security, technological primacy, and ethical and social objectives is unfolding, although to date, the principal players have not consistently identified the nature of the contest or the rules of the game. One approach has been to treat network platforms and their AI as primarily a matter of domestic regulation. In this view, government's principal challenge is to prevent platforms from abusing their positions or shirking previously established or regulated responsibilities. These concepts are evolving and contested, particularly within and between the United States and the EU, and because of the manner in which positive network effects increase value to users with scale, such responsibilities often prove difficult to define. Another approach has been to treat network platforms and mergers and operations as primarily an issue of international strategy. In this view, the popularization of a foreign operator within a country introduces new cultural, economic, and strategic factors. There is the concern that network platforms may foster, even passively, a level of connection and influence that previously would have arisen only from a close alliance, particularly with the use of AI as a tool for learning from and influencing citizens. If a network platform is useful and successful, it comes to support broader commercial and industrial functions, and in this capacity it may become nationally indispensable. At least theoretically, the threatened withdrawal of such a network platform or its key technological inputs, either by a government or a corporation, serves as a potential instrument of leverage, but by the same token as an incentive to make it dispensable. This hypothetical ability to weaponize network platforms or other technologies by withholding them in a crisis may prompt governments to engage in new forms of policy and strategy. For countries and regions that do not produce homegrown network platforms, the choice for their immediate future seems to be between one, limited reliance on platforms that could provide leverage to an adversary government, two, remaining vulnerable, for example, to another government's potential ability to access data about its citizens, or three, counterbalancing potential threats against each other. A government may decide that the risks of allowing certain foreign network platforms to operate within its borders are unacceptable, or that they would need to be balanced by the introduction of rival network platforms. Governments with resources may choose to sponsor a domestic entrant as a rival. In many cases, however, this choice would require substantial and sustained intervention and still risk failure. Advanced countries are likely to try to avoid depending on products of any other single country for key functions. Example, social media, commerce, ride-sharing, particularly in areas where there are several network platforms available globally. That AI-enabled network platforms created by one society may function and evolve within another society and become inextricable from that country's economy and national political discourse marks a fundamental departure from prior eras. Well, thanks for listening and watching. Please like and subscribe. Join me in the next video, and may you find lasting happiness. Bye.